Welcome to the Gray Range Podcast. My name is David Rousseau. We're going to explore the poetry of how we live, how we learn, and how we find our way along this strange path we call life. If you're curious about people, their stories, and all things savage and wonderful, then join me on the Gray Range. All right, welcome. Here we are, and now we're live.
Now we're extra live.
Yeah, now we're extra live. We did the first 5 minutes without actually recording anything.
All right, so we're actually gonna have to we're gonna have a checklist to make sure we press all the right buttons.
Oh, absolutely. This is all a
0.5.
a crazy parabola learning curve.
Yeah.
Where everything happens for the first time.
Yeah.
So I discovered today that all my SD cards were not micro SD cards, so that required another trip to the store. So
Back to Best Buy to give them more of your money.
yeah, for sure. So we're going to kick things off. When I do these and I edit them, more than likely what I'll do is I'll start with the reading,
yeah,
and then go right in from there.
Right
and then
on.
we'll do an introduction and that kind of thing. So hopefully I read it better the second time.
The first time was really good. You nailed it, so it's gonna be hard to top. But
Fuck the doomed. Come on, give me another stress headache. Hit me with more overtime, less pay, no promotion, sleepless nights, glaring gaps in my future planning. Bills piling up faster than my income, lost friendships, hard facts and soft hearts, sadomasochistic bleeding heart heroes, knuckle-dragging gay salesmen, burned black churches with rich pastors and poor nations feeling more pain than a conveniently turned blind eye will assuage. Fuck this level of hostile prosperity, fraudulent social slavery, celebrity cult cannibals feeding on the fresh minds of young debutantes, one stage away from pupating into another locust plague. I'm committed to making sure that kids grow up in a world where the highest of achievements lay in the gilded halls of political councils, chaired by corrupt, shit-slinging apes in bad suits with worse speechwriters, barely stuttering over the next lie that crawls out of their mouths like a fat female spider swollen with eggs, burrowing into our collective consciousness, incubating the next descent of our species, fighting to breathe, to live, to believe. This is the heart of the new normal, the hatred, the division, the subjugation of the nonconformist as the anti-establishment becomes the established, and fuck a moderate and kill the burden of care that got us here. It's all okay, except it's not okay. It's a distraction, a magic trick, classic misdirection meant to dupe suckers clicking on it every minute. So this is what it feels like to be doomed. It's breathtaking.
so that was 2016.
Yeah, this entire collection came from something around 300 plus pieces. I think 322 or 323 pieces that I wrote in 2016 that I managed to pare down to 122 for the collection.
So that's writing every day. That's getting up and grinding it out.
Yeah, I write pretty much every day. I complete a whole piece just about every day.
Yeah,
and that's kind of a funny story because that actually Mr. Aaron Little is responsible for that because years ago he put a Facebook post out, and he asked a question, and he asked, what do you do for a living, and is it something you love, is it what you always dreamed of doing, and like as your primary income, and if so, then how did you make that happen, and if not, why not?
right.
And for some odd reason, that just is like hit me like a hammer. And I was just like, one of those things you read it in the morning, you go to work, it kind of sticks with you all day. And for a couple of days, actually, I was just wondering, like, why aren't I doing what I want to be doing? And what would I do? Like, what would the thing, if I could do the thing I always wanted to do that made me happy and did that as my primary source of income,
Yeah.
what would that be? And I actually hadn't written in a couple of years. I used to write all the time. It was a daily thing.
Yeah.
All through my teens into my mid-20s, and then just kind of got busy working.
Yep.
And kind of got away from creative pursuits.
Work has a habit of doing that to us, right? We push the rest of our lives aside for it.
Yeah, for sure. So I kind of started writing again. I kind of picked up the pen and didn't really know where to start. So I started with poetry because I'd always written poetry. I'd already and poetry and songs. Like I wrote, did a lot of music when I was younger. So
right, because you were in a band growing up too.
Yeah, I was in a few, like, wanted to, your teenage rock star thing, right? Everybody wants to be in a band. It's the best pickup line when you're like 18 years old. I'm in a band.
Yeah.
That's all you need. You don't even need money. So I started writing again, and it was about that time you had shown me the Jocko podcast.
Right. Yep.
And listening to him, and he's kind of his thing about, well, if you want to get better with something, do it every day. The whole discipline thing.
Yeah, unmitigated daily discipline in all things, right?
Yeah,
Uncle
100%.
Jocko knocks it out of the park for us.
Oh, fucking A. It was a thing where I kind of just sat down. I'm like, every day I'm gonna write something every day and see what happens.
Yeah.
And here I am, 6 years later.
Yeah.
I think I'm closing in on 2,400 published pieces to my website.
Dang.
It's produced a book finally.
Yeah, which is freaking awesome.
So I guess enough about me, enough about the intro. We're here on the Gray Range podcast with Lucas Orich. My name is David Roussel. I write Hocus Gray poetry. Been publishing for about 10 years on that format, and run as Hocus Gray on all my social media. And it just kind of figured it was a next evolution to start a podcast and start talking about things that are kind of in our collective interest. So poetry kind of leads me to open conversation, and I think there's a lot of value in having some conversations about what's going on in the world. So
yeah, I agree, and I'm just honored to be here. I was pretty flattered the other day when you asked me. I was like, what? Yeah, okay. Like I do a lot. I don't write. But
I write enough for the both of us.
That you do, man. I read your stuff pretty well daily on Twitter because you're pretty active on there, getting things up, and that's kind of my quick scroll in the morning when I get out of bed.
Yeah.
So a lot of. I never comment. I'm a Twitter scroller, but I always read it, and it's killer stuff you're putting out. So good on you.
Yeah, it's just it's that thing where someone's like, well, if you can do it, if it's something you enjoy, then it's just one of those things where I'm just going to keep creating. Once I started, I couldn't stop. So,
it's funny that Aaron, I think he inspired a lot of people to pursue things that they like. I mean, I'm still fighting almost every day.
Yeah, 100%. So, I guess a little backstory on yourself. Where'd you grow up, and what got you to where you're at now? Give us the quick synopsis.
The quick synopsis. Okay, well, I grew up pretty well all over Alberta. My dad was a forest officer or a forest ranger back in the day. So we lived in a lot of little towns, and we moved around a bit. I think the longest we were ever anywhere I don't think it was more than 10 years. So my formative years, I kind of grew up in High Level, little town in northern Alberta.
I have been.
Not much going on up there, but it was a cool place to grow up. Made lots of lifelong friends and got started working.
Started with oil patch work. Or?
Yeah, I think everybody that grows up there, you kind of end up in the oil patch or in logging, like the lumber industry, some kind of commodity based anyway, for sure. And kind of worked seasonally for forestry as well. So I kind of ended up having this life where I bounced between pipelining and facility construction and all this welding stuff in the winters. And I'd go work for the Alberta government through the summer. So I kind of had doing the wildfire stuff. And I kind of ended up in, working in warehouses, doing supply and logistics. And that's kind of, I swapped back and forth between those two things for many years. It was a cool kind of 2 seasonal jobs, which was nice because I get bored. So there was always, these seasonal changes, and then kind of, met my wife along the way there. She was a forest officer. And then
Did you meet her when you were living in High Level?
no, actually, so I moved out of High Level. Trying to think when that was. Would have been the late '90s, like '97 or '98, somewhere in there, I think. And I moved. My dad had moved down to Black Diamond, just south of Calgary, and you know, I ended up getting a job in the Crow's Nest Pass, and I moved down to the mountains, and I was working for forestry down there because I'd already kind of been in the game for a few years and had some connections, mostly due to my dad. So thanks, Dad, if you ever watch this. And I ended up working in the Crow's Nest Pass, which was beautiful, man. I just, what a wonderful piece of Alberta.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And then my wife, she was working as what was she doing? Hell attack, firefighting, something. And then she was like a guardian, kind of like the law enforcement people in the bush that nobody wants to, they're going to wreck your party. So I met her down there, and then I lived down there for, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years, something like that. And then she ended up getting a job as a forest officer in Grand Prairie, and then we moved up here. And that's when I, excuse me, that's when I really hit it hard on the welding. Did that for quite a few years. That became my full-time gig. And then eventually got out of that, became a mailman, which is another whole saga.
Right, the time I met you, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a very interesting transition to go from working in the oil patch and then going to be a mailman. And everyone was like, "What is wrong with you, dude? What are you doing with your life?" But I needed that reset. That was kind of maybe, I don't know, I don't say dark times, but that was interesting.
Oh yeah, there was a lot of guys who took a different route at that time during that downturn.
Yeah, I just didn't know anybody. I don't know any old welders that are in good shape, guys that are in their 70s or 80s. They just don't make it that long. And at that point, when I punched out, it'd be 20 years. A good chunk of it was seasonal, but I just felt like I'd had enough of the oil patch. I raised up 2 apprentices under me who went on to be very successful, good hard workers. I didn't feel like I owed the patch anything, and it certainly didn't owe me anything. So it was time for a change.
That's a healthy separation.
Yeah, it was good. It was rough. It was very rough. I'm not going to say it was healthy for my family or excuse me, for my marriage for sure. That was, but everything worked out. And then
now you're slinging gun.
Yeah, now I hustle guns to the people. Yeah, for a good friend of mine. So that's kind of, and I've always been interested in guns, like since I was a kid. But never pursued it as a career in any way, and I just kind of fell into it.
Right. Well, I mean, that's kind of how I met you. Like, where did your love of shooting come from?
So, when I was a kid, I grew up in Nordegg, which is like another little mountain town in the middle of nowhere. Not even in Nordegg. I grew up outside of it.
There's a lot of outside of Nordegg.
Yeah.
More than Nordegg.
Yeah, a lot of it. I lived across from Coliseum and Baldy Mountain, which are 2 very recognizable mountains. But I lived in right along the Forestry Trunk Road. There's a little ranger station there. And I remember as a kid, there was this little back road that I think it went to an old dump or something. And I remember as a kid, my dad taking us out there and letting us shoot in this old dump. He had this old 6-shooter, this little 22. And we were shooting, I don't know, cans or something like that, and I couldn't have been very old. Like I was maybe in grade 3 or something, and that always stuck with me. I always loved it after that. And then growing up in High Level, there was lots of opportunities to shoot. A buddy of mine by the name of Tim, his dad was he would take us out to the gravel pit and just let us shoot all afternoon. So,
no, that's awesome.
When you're a kid, $10 you could buy 500 rounds of 22.
Yep.
So we would all pitch in our $10 and pour all the shells into an ice cream pail. The old 4-liter pail.
Day's fun, right?
Yeah, and we'd just sit there and shoot like for a whole day, and that's what we did. It was good times, and then so that's kind of where it started. And then once I moved up here, like I did a little bit of shooting, through my and gun stuff, teenage years, and then young man kind of stuff, and then once I moved up here. Really, when I moved to Grand Prairie is where it really took off. That's when I really started shooting a lot and kind of became more of a passion.
Right. Yeah, Grand Prairie's always had as far as I've experienced it since about 2009 as a very active shooting community.
Yeah, everybody has guns up here.
And there's a passion for competition.
Yeah.
It's a mecca for hunting. There's a lot of the pursuit of training. For elevating skills, and that's how how I met you, was through the defensive pistol nights,
right?
At
Yeah,
the local range, and
because I was running that for a few years. I took it over from a fella by the name of Mike. He had run it for a bunch of years, and he was. I think he was welding too at the time. Something about welders and guns in this town. I don't know, man.
Makes sense.
But he was off working, and I ended up I'd been participating in those shoots, and soaking up as much as I could. I mean, it just blew my mind. I was like, "What? You can shoot pistols and do all this cool stuff." And so I did that. I ended up taking over those shoots as he went off, and eventually I handed the torch to somebody else, who handed it to somebody else. But yeah, during that time, that's probably where I met. Actually, most of the people that I hang around with today were all from that kind of time period. That was kind of like, that was the bond. Because I hadn't been up here for very long, maybe a year or two before I started that. And then, and so everybody sort of in my friend circle these days, if you will, or my closer friends anyways, they're all from that time period. It's all guys that I met doing that. And then,
that makes sense.
And then we kind of all evolved together. We started doing all these crazy training classes and and it just kind of kept going from there. So,
no, that's awesome, man. And so now, what do you do with? You're working for Barton's Big Country.
Yeah,
you're in Grand Prairie.
Yeah, bartonsbigcountry.ca.
Right on, man. How long you been there for now?
So I think it's got to be close to about 4 years, but I full time for 3-ish, I think. So
wow, already.
When I met Mike. Again, years ago, doing the defensive pistol stuff, and he actually remembers it better than I do, but he's like, "Oh yeah, we used to race in the basement because we'd have the shot clock, and whatever the drill was, it might be draw and fire 2 shots in under however many seconds, or 0.8 of a second from concealed, or whatever the drill was." And he was fast, man. I
remember.
But I was fast too back then, so we had some pretty good races. There's a little bit of that healthy competition, and then we'd kind of stayed in touch and bumped into each other at these shooting events over the years, whether it was, I think, like either training or training classes or 3-gun matches, stuff like that. And at some point in his life, that's his story to tell, but he ended up buying Barton's. And I think the story kind of goes like he was, making operator money, and he kept bringing home new guns, and his wife said something, "If you like it so much, why don't you buy it?" And I think that kind of started to grind in his mind. But again, we'll have to get that whole story from him one day.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So then, I was still a customer at Barton's. I'd walk in, I'm always looking for whatever reloading supplies or all hunting stuff, the same as every other dude in Grand Prairie, I guess. And he'd always tell me, "Well, if you get sick of doing whatever, you can always come and work for me." And I was like, "No." Because I don't like people. I actually hate people, and I hate salespeople even more.
Understood.
So then it got to a point where I dropped in there one day, and it was the middle of summer, right? Gorgeous, beautiful summer, and everyone's going on holidays. And Mike says to me, he's like, "Hey, man, do you want to work here on Saturday just for a day?" And I'm like, "Not really. Why? Who's going to be there?" He's like, "Just me and you." I was like, "Oh." I was like, well, then I kind of have to say yes, because I'll never let my friends, I'm not going to leave them hanging.
Right.
So I'm like, "Yeah, okay, I'll do it." So I come down to the shop and worked the sales counter for the day. We clicked. We pushed a bunch of guns out the door. It was all right. Things were pretty cool. And then after that, so it got through that day, and I was like, "Oh, hey, so-and-so is going on holidays for a week. Like, do you want to cover a little bit part-time, like, through that?" And I'm like, "Bro, like, I have a full-time job. I'm a mailman." But of course, I was crushing it out. I was pretty well done work by 11 every day at the latest. Like, I'd get up early, get to the plant, sort my mail, do my run, and most days I was in Barton's by 11 o'clock working. After a while, so I covered some holidays, and then it was like, "Okay, well, hey, do you want to work this day?" And then pretty soon I was working 5 days a week there, And it got to be a lot because I was like, oh man, so now I'm working 2 jobs. I'm back to working oil patch hours. And I didn't want to do that because, I had kids at home and everything. And so finally I just told Mike, I was like, hey man, if you want me, just, make me an offer. Like I like working here and everything, but I just can't do both. So he made me an offer. I was like, yeah, cool. So I gave my 2 weeks notice, closed my 5-year chapter of being a mailman and started working there full time. And then,
Nice.
Yeah, so that's kind of like, that's a super condensed version of everything, but that's
that's great.
That's how I ended up there. And that was a real struggle because, I don't mean that negatively. It was just a huge change for me to go from, being in charge of, all of my time, being at the top of my game when I was welding, ultimately working for myself is how I look at it. And then to go like sales as like customer service and then just having to deal with people on a different level and then realizing how shitty people are. Not all of them.
Retail is a certain level of hell for a lot of people.
Yeah, we have a lot of, like, there's so many good people out there, but there's some bad ones, man. And one bad one can wreck your day, and it kind of, yeah. So if you deal with 100 people and you get that one crappy dude in the morning, man, it just set the tone for the day. So I'm good at it. Like, I don't get bent about it anymore, but yeah, it was a huge change. It was working with that many people. Cause I'd go from dealing with 2 people in a week. And now suddenly I'm dealing with like I say, it could be 100 people in a day. And you're like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bit much. So what's it been like through the past couple of years, through COVID, through the Trudeau administration and the implementation of some of these really restrictive gun laws that we're seeing in Canada?
So about the time I was working full time at Barton's it was a matter of months, and then COVID and the world shutting down, and I'm like, wow, did I just make a huge mistake? I just went from like a fully pensioned benefit job with the feds to working for my buddy in a small business, and I'm like, am I even gonna have a job? Like, am I gonna be able to feed my kids? My wife will be super pumped about this if we get shut down. But it worked out because the hunting stores were it was classed as essential services. Essential services.
Yeah.
So that was fortunate for sure, and then so people began to stockpile outdoor supplies and ammunition, right? Because it was like, the world's a scary place, and there was all this. I don't want to jump off the deep end about, conspiracy theories and, bioweapons and all that, because there's enough of that going around. But but you have to understand that this was what's driving the psyche of the masses. Like, people are genuinely worried.
100%.
And they're thinking, like, how are we going to get through this? Like, they don't know if this disease at the time when it kicked off, nobody knew if it was going to wipe out a bunch of the world and you were going to go back to being cavemen and hunting stuff out in the bushes or whatever drives fear, right? It was a little different.
I think it exposed for the first time for a lot of people.
Yeah,
it exposed the vulnerability of their world, where all of the systems and everything they've come to depend on, all of a sudden weren't certain for the first time. So you had people who would never think about owning firearms or self-reliance in any kind of way, all of a sudden started to look at it. And in my mind, like, it was prior to meeting you, when I kind of started to get my shit together in my life in my mid-20s and had something to defend, and I realized that I had no ability or means to defend it. I had somebody that I cared about in my life. I had, who's my wife now, 17 years later, but I didn't have any of that. So the first thing I went to was, I need to own a firearm.
Yeah, and right? A lot of people did that because they were scared, man, and they were worried about the potential collapse of civilization. And there was people coming into the store and like, I need to buy a gun. We're like, okay, like, no big deal. Just, you show us your license, we do the paperwork, and you're on your way. And they're like, I don't have a license. You're like, okay, well, that's awkward, but like, you're going to have to go and take the course and then apply, send away your license, and in 6 to 8 months, report back here with your results. Like, it takes that long. And there was people literally in tears, some were in tears and feeling hopeless that they couldn't get what they thought they needed to look after their family. And then other people were angry. They're like, well, this is bullshit. I should be able to buy a fucking gun. And you're like, whoa, hey, dude, like, chill. So we kind of had that whole spectrum of stuff going on. And then shortly after, the Trudeau Liberals dropped the infamous OIC, where they banned 1,500 plus types of firearms. So we go from this COVID scramble where everybody is buying as much as they possibly can to now there's a gun ban that didn't go through Parliament. So it's an OIC. It's basically an imperial decree.
Yeah, an order in council. It kind of circumvents Parliament.
Yeah, so it's kind of a cheap way to
it's the equivalent of a U.S. executive order.
Right. It's very dictatorial. So it kind of I don't want. Yeah, it's a shitty thing for people who are Democratic. So we get into this ban. And there's a little bit of a heads up on it. Like everyone knows it's going to drop on the Monday or Tuesday or whatever the day was. I can't remember. And there's people like driving down from the territories and buying pickup truckloads of ammo. Like they come in and be like, well, how many boxes of 30-30 you got? And I'd be like, 27. They're like, I'll take it. I was like, okay, fuck. Like I'll help you carry it out. But guys were literally panic buying ammo. Like we had, there was, if you can envision 2 pallets worth of these crappy Remington Thunderbolts. Were they Thunderbolts? I don't remember. They were like these little cheap Remington shells but there was literally tons. And my coworker, Ricky, he's like, yeah, buds, there's enough here to last forever. I'll die before we ever sell through these. Well, we sold through those in, I don't know, 20 days or so.
Oh, wow.
There was that much volume of ammo going through that place. We emptied the back. So for us, we had a lot of ammo, and ammo was like gold. So it was pretty fortunate for us that we had that stock. But yeah, people just, once the OIC dropped, man, people were getting their hands on as many guns as possible. I'm not gonna second guess their decision making. Like maybe you should get some food first or whatever. But
I'm not gonna say I wasn't among those people.
Yeah, I think everybody was, because they kind of saw the writing on the wall. And I think anybody who studies history is like, well, when they start coming for the guns, like that's when people get worried. Of course, my business is selling guns now, so
yeah, there's no end to the ends of the world that are coming. So
right,
your guys' business is it's minus the government. Banning certain models of firearms. It's a pretty secure market to be in.
It is and it isn't. I think it is because it's a business based on self-reliance, and therefore it has a lot going for it. But the downside is the government is trying to fucking crush you at every step of the way, because now we just had this recent handgun freeze take effect, this Bill C-21.
Yeah, the second part of second part of their imperial ban on
right, and again, that's all through OIC. It hasn't actually gone through Parliament yet, but that sparked another big panic of people buying pistols. So I think the stats was something like in the first 30 days after that announcement, there was 5 years worth of pistols sold in Canada. We sold 10 an hour till we ran out, which is a lot, because normally we would sell, like around Christmas, maybe you'd have a dozen pistol day, and you'd be like, wow, the pistol counter was super hot. And that might be like a dad buying 3 matching pistols for like him and his 2 kids. And I don't mean like high end stuff. I mean like maybe he bought some little, revolvers that are, $200 or $300 each, just so they'd have matching guns. Right. Sure. But the day after that announcement was made, I had a fella come in and he's like, oh, what do you got in a 9mm Glock? And I'm like, I got a whole drawer full. So I open the drawer and I start taking them out. And I got 6 or 7 on the counter. They're all laid out. He's like, yeah, it looks good. I'll take it. I'm like, oh, which one? He's like, all of them. I was like, yeah, fuck. Okay. Like right on. And that's the kind of sales, like people were just buying everything. And I get it, because they were looking at it as like, if you're a young dude in your 20s, and this is all the pistols you're ever going to own for the rest of your life, and you're still allowed to take them to the range, you can still shoot them, but the commies are trying to crush it out in a generation. So if you've got, 50 years of good shooting ahead of you, you don't want to get bored, so yeah, you're going to buy a bunch of pistols.
Oh, damn right.
Nobody knows what the supply chain will look like as far as like, can I get parts? Can I get this? Can I get that? I don't know. It's already crappy. And so, yeah, that's what we did. I won't quote exact numbers because that's like, that's company stuff, but we sold a lot of guns, a ton, I way more than you would think. And, people up here, they like their freedom and they like their guns.
This is an interesting area.
Yeah.
It seems to be, there's portions of the West and portions of specifically Alberta that hold a very high regard for personal autonomy, self-reliance, self-sufficiency, and these are things that these are values that were bred in me growing up, and I never particularly, like, when I was in my teens, 20s, really liked living here.
Yeah.
It was kind of an out of the way place. I wanted to be somewhere more urban, somewhere more connected. Of course, with the advent of social media and the internet and stuff like that,
right?
You don't need to be somewhere to be connected.
The world got a lot smaller.
Well, absolutely. And then as I get older, and especially since the COVID and basically the past 5 years, being in a more remote place is a lot more secure in my mind. You're not dealing with so many of these problems that are large urban scale problems. I mean, Grand Prairie has it's microcosms of that urban issue.
Yeah, it has the same issues as everywhere else, just on a different scale. But it's certainly its own little bubble. Like when I moved up here with my wife back in, I think it was like December of 2003. We're like, well, we'll move up there for 5 years and see if we like it. And then if we don't, well, we'll just move on to the next thing.
Yeah, I remember giving it 3.
Yeah, and here I am still. Actually, I really like it up here, and I like the community. So it's because these people are more like me than I won't say than anywhere else, but it's certainly a better fit for me and the things I like to do than some of the bigger urban centers.
Well, especially now, like in the present tense.
Yeah.
And this is part of the impetus of why I started the podcast was, if you don't tell your own story, someone will tell it for you.
Yeah.
And one of the things I'm hoping to be able to do with this podcast is to be able to bring in people from the area and have conversations with them. I mean, not specifically, to be the be all and end all, but one of the things I really want to do is bring in people from this area so they can tell their story. One of the things as a writer is every single writer is beating their fucking brains out trying to be the next Stephen King or the next, the next fucking Jack, or pick a guy off the shelf behind me, right? Yeah. They're trying to do this thing, and while I love to tell stories, I kind of thought about it, and I was like, I could spend my time trying to tell the stories that I'm making up in my head, which is great and all.
Yeah.
But every human being is a living story. And they're a whole lot more fucking interesting than anything I'm going to invent in my brain.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm like, why don't I just set something up where I can talk to people? And that was kind of what I wanted to do, back in the day. I went to some pre-journalism in college and stuff like that before being a rock star became a better idea. But that didn't pan out, obviously.
So now you're back to the journalism thing.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Here I am 30 years later or 20 years later coming back to the well.
So one thing that's been really interesting for me since I started working at Barton's anyways, is there's a lot more opportunity to talk to people at the counter because a gun store, a hunting store is like, you get this cast of interesting characters who, man, they're not just there to buy something, cool if they do, but very often they're just, oh yeah, I had half an hour, and people just like the culture there, so they just want to hang out and chat.
Oh, 100%.
And Matt, I've met some very.
I used to personally, like when I'd fly into Edmonton, and I'd have I'd actually take a later flight.
Yeah.
Like, so I didn't have to be rushed to get back out of the city to the airport. But also, like, if there was a 6 o'clock flight and an 8 o'clock flight, I'd take the 8 o'clock flight because I wouldn't have to fight so much rush hour traffic, when we were getting the rental car back and going through all that stuff. And I could stop at Cabela's.
Right.
And I could just walk around there for like an hour.
Yeah. Well, so it's, Yeah, because if you're into hunting and guns and all that stuff, there's so much cool stuff to check out. So you know, people will get lost for hours just poking around in the corners, and then you'll get a lot of people they're just there to tell a story, or they'll tell you about their hunt. Hey man, I stalked this elk yesterday, and they'll tell you about it. It's this fantastic story, and then over time you develop relationships with a lot of these people, and they'll come in and just to chat and bullshit and catch up with you. And yeah, so this city is full of interesting people, like with interesting stories.
Being that Grand Prairie's county number 1,
Yeah.
first incorporated county in Alberta. I've heard some crazy stories, like everything from, old West outlaws running from the law, ending up here, like old U.S. Marshals and stuff chasing guys up here.
Yeah.
To bootleggers.
Yeah, during the Vietnam War, the back to the land craze, a lot of draft dodgers came up and settled around in this area too.
Yeah.
And I've met some of those guys over the years, and yeah, they got a fantastic, interesting life too. But yeah, guys settling in the Saddle Hills and raising cattle, and just because I didn't want to go fight in somebody else's war, and like there's tons of interesting people up here.
Yeah, that was part of the impetus behind this whole thing, right? Was, why try to tell my story? And then when I started looking around at where I was, because I was thinking, well, maybe I need to be somewhere, again, in a more central place, like more urban center, because just your access to people to talk to, just more people.
Yeah.
And then I thought about it, and I was like, the vast majority of the really interesting people that I've met, probably in the last 20 years, weren't from here. Like, that weren't from here, were here.
Yeah.
Like, they all came here for some reason, and normally it was some tie in, some common thing. So it was either a shooting event, it was a hunting. They were up here to hunt. They were a martial arts event, something common, right? Where those are the things that changed my life. Like, I'm kind of working on an idea right now about how guns essentially changed my life, because I was a kid with no direction. I was a young adult with no direction.
Yeah.
Gone to all the wrong things and went so down the bad path. I was almost irredeemable. But then when I started trying to find my way out, like I said, I finally had something worth defending and realized I didn't have any means to it.
Right.
I had to go through all the rigmarole to get the license and get the permitting and buy a handgun, and then went to the defensive pistol night because I heard about that.
Yeah.
And then I think I heard about it online. But from there, it was a journey of meeting really down-to-earth people who had strong morals, really, strong moral compass, really, professional people who had good jobs, people who looked out for each other, people who looked out for their community, people who were disciplined. And then that led to martial arts, which was like another level of all that stuff. So all that same discipline, all that same accountability, all that same like the training and showing up on time and being a good person and being a good training partner. And that all, like, I didn't have that like as a whole and through a lot of my life. And I found that good male role model situation in the shooting community, and then again, even more so in the martial arts community.
Yeah, it's funny how they're connected.
Yeah. And then as I get older, I'm finding that again through this broader community in Grand Prairie. So I'm finding it in a lot of the hunting community. I'm finding it in the agricultural community.
Yeah,
I'm finding like these really grassroots, down to earth kind of people who are looking after themselves, looking after their family, looking after their community. Never, hesitate to give you the shirt off their back. Kind of people that you're like, oh, these are the kind of people I want to be around, and not just the kind of people I want to be around. These are the kind of people I want to have community with.
Yeah, I think specifically with the gun, what are we going to call it? The gun community. whatever term we settle
there's
on.
a shooting community.
The shooting community. I think
I think there's a difference between shooters and gun owners.
For sure. So I think the people that are actual shooters, they're a lot more disciplined. They almost treat it like tradecraft. They're without getting too wrapped around the tool itself, they're the people that don't mind leaving, the spot by the fire, picking up their tool and going out into the wilderness or going out into the land. They're not afraid of that, right? And it's that these are the same people that would do it with a spear. So they're just a different kind of people. Shooters they're disciplined and focused, and safe and aware of the world that they live in. I think there's a big part of that, and that's kind of why it's similar to martial artists. You'll get all kinds. I mean, you'll get your competitors, and then you'll get your hobbyists.
Yeah, and you'll get your shit rats too. I mean, I'm not going to say that the shooting community is some ultra high level of society where you don't have a bell curve of.
No, it's like anything, man. Yeah, there's always
absolutely.
that whatever 1 or 2% that kind of might leave a bad taste in your mouth. But by and large, it's a good bunch of people doing good things. So
yeah, 100%. And I think too, like without getting too, I mean, I'm really hoping that. This is the first of many conversations we get to have. I hope that, as I said, I'd like to keep going down this direction. But I think there's, with the shooting stuff, like there's levels to it, just like with anything, right?
Yeah.
Once you start going out and doing the actual activities, be it taking some kind of more advanced training, or some kind of competency training, or getting into competition. Once you kind of get out of your comfort zone, same with martial arts, right?
Yeah.
You can show up and do the weekly class, or you can show up every day, or you can go to seminars, or you can travel to Japan, right? Or travel internationally. And it's as much as you put in it, you're going to get out of it. But at the same time, it gives you that opportunity to break out of your shell. To do something more adventurous.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the experiences I had because of the people I met through the shooting community and through the martial arts community gave me a lot of courage to do things in my personal life, to do things in my professional life that I would never have done before if I hadn't have, like, hey, I've already done something this stressful. I've already done something that I was uncomfortable with. So now I'm more comfortable stepping out of my comfort zone professionally, or asserting myself, standing up for myself in a relationship or in a professional situation.
I think what's the term? It's comfortable in chaos. It's kind of like, and chaos doesn't have to be this, evil, whatever, the anarchy and everything's crazy, but it can be just a bit chaotic stepping out of your comfort zone. And one thing about, in the shooting community and martial arts is that I don't want to paint it all with the same brush, but it attracts a certain kind of people, and those people are cool. And if you hang around those people, like you'll kind of you'll rise to that level too, especially if you're all doing it together. If you think about the first time you ever took a training class with a pistol class or rifle class, and man, you look around down the line and you're like, man, these people don't know what's going on either. They're all just as scared as you are. They're all just as worried, just as nervous. Or if it's their first time on the mats doing martial arts, and that's just is what it is. But what they did is they had the courage to walk through the door.
Yeah.
The first time they step on the mats, and then they kind of get that out of their system, and then they get to learn and hang out with all these cool people. Same as shooting. Once you show up and once, it's the time for the first drill, and that pistol comes out of the holster and you're shooting whatever it is, 2 to the 2 and 1 to the 1, you're shooting dots or whatever. And then you take those first few shots. And then once you get over that initial kind of hesitation, it's kind of addictive.
Yeah, I think so. I remember, to bring this conversation full circle, my first class was with Aaron Little. When he was teaching for James Yeager with Tactical Response.
Right.
Up here in Peace River with Paul Gomez and Jay Gibson.
Right, and we were doing, what did we do, fighting rifle?
I believe it was fighting rifle. It was the course I did. I only stuck around for the 2 day.
Right, okay, I was there for all 6 because I'm a junkie, right? But yeah.
That was my first experience with it.
Yeah.
And I remember driving home and getting home, and man, I was just a fat sack of crap then, man. I was probably like 255 or something like that. just giant, out of shape guy.
I think I looked the same
And
back then.
I think I was driving like my Dodge Neon, no, my Cavalier or something like that.
Yeah, you had a little
really
car
low
back
to the
then.
ground.
Yeah.
And I remember like rolling out of my car.
Yeah.
Because I'd probably moved more in that 2 days, like up, down, different positions than I probably had in like the previous 2 years.
Right.
Like I was very sedentary and going out to do this thing and then but riding this dopamine rush for like a week afterwards, where I was just like, I can't believe that you can do that. Like, I can't believe you get to go out and hang out with all these dudes.
Yeah.
Everywhere from, guys like me who had no idea what they were doing, guys who just, I bought a firearm and showed up to a class, to guys who were getting some reps in before they went contracting.
Yeah.
To guys who were there living their, fantasy football dream to go and to train with, former Blackwater or former whoever, right?
Yeah.
And but to be there in that camaraderie and that kind of group identity was interesting, because it was this possibility where it was like, oh, there's something else out there. There's a higher level of ability that I don't have. And I remember like right after that, it was like, actually I think it was, right after that, I'm pretty sure I bought a treadmill like the next week.
Yeah, well, yeah, because when you partake in something like that, and after the first day, you jump in your vehicle and like, what the fuck just happened? Like, that was crazy. And then it's kind of like, that was cool, and I want more. And all these other guys are doing it too. You kind of, it kind of, like for me, when I first started training and doing that kind of stuff, I was like, oh, it's not just me. I'm not the only guy. There's more than one of us that likes this lifestyle and wants to pursue it. And it's kind of it's oddly comforting and I don't know what the word is, but it's reaffirming. Whatever. It's just it was a very cool thing to start.
Well, absolutely, because everything that's come after that.
Yeah.
Be it, way ego works, right? It was, I don't have any means to defend what I love, so I need a firearm instead of, instead of learning some sort of martial arts first. Yeah. Right. It took me, I think, a year before I was like, oh, wait a sec. The likelihood of me actually using a firearm as self-defense is like astronomically low compared to needing some sort of hand-to-hand or combatives or something like that, right?
Which is how I got started in martial arts too, because it was like doing all this gunfighting stuff. And then I'm like, okay, well, I live in Canada. We're not allowed to, we can't carry these things around with us as much as I'd love to. But that's just not a real thing in this country. And then it was like, well, statistically, I'm pretty sure, again, it was Aaron Little who told me, weight your decisions by 2 categories, probable and possible, and then allocate your time and resources accordingly. So if it's probable, well then, man, you need to make that a priority because it's probably going to happen. If it's possible, well then you're probably just wasting your time, because if it's just possible, like how possible? 1%, 2%, whereas probable means like it's probably going to happen. So
over 50% or 50% or higher.
Yeah, right. So then you got to take it more serious.
Toss. Yeah,
so
for sure.
Like, okay, so that's rattling around in my head. I'm like, probable versus possible. And I still make decisions based on those categories today. But I remember finishing up a class, and I can't remember. I know Aaron was there. It was a fighting pistol class or advanced fighting pistol, whatever it was. And the tradition at Tactical Response is everyone would always go out for dinner in the evening, because you can kind of debrief and get to know everybody and just, kick back, have a beer and a hamburger, and you're not on the line. You don't have to talk about shooting. And so I'm talking to Aaron, and this is the biggest city I ever lived in. I always lived in all these small towns. So there's some choice here for martial arts, right? There's boxing, karate, taekwondo, etc. There's all this stuff going on. And we had finished up early because we had burned through a whole pile of material. Another crazy day. Yeah, it was advanced fighting pistol, and we got to do some combatives afterward because Aaron was a combatives instructor.
Yeah.
So we're talking about knives and hand-to-hand combat, and he had an MMA gym called
Gorilla something, wasn't it?
I think it was Performance Edge.
Oh, Performance Edge, right.
Yeah, it had a gorilla for a logo. It was pretty cool. I don't know if he's still doing that. I
don't
hope
think so.
I don't think so. I think he's doing the acro stuff. But the dude, like, he was like a gnarly fighter. He had all this. He was just excellent at it, and he could explain things very simply. So we got to spend a couple hours doing these combatives drills, and then we're out for dinner, and I'm having a beer, and I look at Aaron. I'm like, "Hey, Aaron," I was like, "if you could pick like one martial art, I should rewind a little bit." So during the advanced stuff, there was like a bunch of heavy bag work and knife work and all these drills with guns. Like, it was like crazy gunfighting stuff.
Yeah.
And so then you're like, man, you see some guys can't punch or kick worth a shit. They can't throw a knee. They can't throw an elbow. I did okay because I like to fight. But again, certainly well aware of my deficiencies. I'm like, because I'm watching other guys. I'm like, oh, I want to be able to punch like that guy. That fucking dude can punch. So then, so we're having dinner. I'm like, hey, Aaron, if you could pick one martial art out of all the stuff that's available in any given town, like, what would you pick? I'm like, would you do like taekwondo, karate, boxing, wrestling, MMA? And I knew he was an MMA coach and ran a gym. So I kind of thought that's what he would say. Like, oh, you should try MMA because it'll round you out as a fighter. But what he told me is like, well, you should go train with Mike. And I'm like, which Mike? Because, like, there's 100 Mikes. He's like, that Mike. I'm like, what? He's like, yeah, Mike's a ninja. And I thought he was fucking with me, right? I'm like, a ninja? Like, fuck off. He's like, no, Mike's actually a ninja. Ask him about it. I was like, okay. So then I go and I talk to Mike. I'm like, hey, Mike, like, I heard you, like, run some training and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I'm fired at the dojo in January. I was like, oh, okay. But Aaron's point was, well, you should train with people you know. This guy's already doing something. Go train with him. Then you're not going to have to worry about, which cookie cutter flavor of taekwondo or karate you want and this and that.
Yeah.
And that's how I started too. But because I saw or became aware of a deficiency I had that, like, if you actually want to be able to fight, you better know your hand-to-hand stuff. And again, probable versus possible. I've been in way more, even just growing up, I was in way more fist fight altercations than gun and knife fights. As fun and glamorous as gun, knife, and stick fighting and sword fighting is, I love swords. It's just probably not going to happen. And if it does, well, like, who knows what state the world's in then? But you're more likely to get, whether it's a parking lot or shoplifter altercation. Those are some funny stories.
100%, man. 100%. So you you and I trained together for quite a few years in the like the Togakuri ninjutsu stuff.
Yeah.
And now you're doing jujitsu. How's that going?
Wow. Yeah. So that was another funny thing. Well, kind of funny. So
wait a sec. Just so we get some perspective here. How old are you?
Right now I'm 45. I just turned 45.
And you just got your blue belt.
Yeah. Actually, I just got a stripe on my blue belt.
Fucking A, brother.
On when was that? Monday. Last Monday I got a stripe on my blue belt.
Dope.
Yeah. So still old and still fighting. So the way that I got into jiu-jitsu, so yeah, it's no secret. I was, we were running a dojo. We had a cool bunch of guys, and we were training. We were traveling the world. We were traveling to seminars. We were flying to Japan and doing cool stuff. And then COVID hit, and the world locked down, and nobody could travel anymore. There's nothing to do. Everyone was, didn't really want to be training together and this and that. And guys get busy with work and commitments. And so my boy had agreed to start doing some jiu-jitsu. And so there's me taking him twice a week, and I'm sitting on the sidelines, and I'm watching, and I'm like, and meanwhile there's an adults class happening, and I'm like, man, I can't just be sitting here, right? So I started doing jiu-jitsu. I was like, I'm going to try this. And I got hooked immediately because I got beat up. Like, I got choked out by a 14-year-old girl. I'm like, what just happened? These very, very skilled players there.
Yeah.
And then, so I get a gi. I get an Origin gi because, I watch all the
Jocko.
hype. Yeah.
Shout out to Jocko.
Yeah. And Echo, so.
Oh, yeah.
So I was like, because that's what's going in my head. I'm like, well, I need a gi. I need an Origin gi. So I ordered one up and strapped that thing on and started rolling classes. And they still had group classes because this is a COVID light. Like, it hasn't quite kicked in to the extent where the world's going to lock down yet.
Yeah.
And then I'm starting to get beat up a lot by all these other like little girls too. And I'm like, wow, here I thought I could throw hands. And again, I mean, we're playing by the rules. I mean, I'm not sticking knives in anybody, and we're not gunfighting, and we're not punching. Like, it's jiu-jitsu. It's a different game. It's completely different.
Yeah.
And man, I fell in love with it right away because I was getting schooled. Just kept showing up. And then, of course, COVID comes and group classes start getting canceled. And I had an opportunity to keep training anyways. So I did. I don't know. Is there a statute of limitations on things like that? Whatever. Let's just say I joined the Underground Fight Club. And
fucking right.
And
got as any good man should.
Yeah, I was like, got the invite and I was in and got all this super high quality instruction. And then a good friend of mine, a mutual friend of ours, he started training too. So then it worked out really good because now I had a sparring partner with the coach coaching us. So we got to do a bunch of cool stuff for about a year in the underground. Yeah. And so here I am, it's now I've been on the mats rolling jiu-jitsu for just over 3 years, I think.
How many nights a week are you training?
None. I train mornings. So I get up at 5:30 every morning and I'm on the mats from 6:30 to 7:30, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Nice. And this old body needs that Friday, Saturday, Sunday off, man. The morning classes are pretty sparring intensive. But it's good.
Yeah, because everybody who's there fucking wants to get after it.
That's they're up in the morning and they want to fight.
Yeah, and you don't find no slackers at 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, and coach, he's a sparring intensive coach. So it's nice. I joke with people like they'll ask me a technique. I'm like, I don't know that. I only know how to spar, but I couldn't tell you the 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 steps to get through whatever technique. I'm actually just starting to learn that better now. I took a coaching position.
Of course you did.
And it's like an assistant one. I'm like a Batman extra. I don't actually have to do anything but show up and be the dummy. But I'm helping with the kids class, which is great because now I'm like, oh, that's how you do a De La Riva sweep or whatever technique.
Yeah.
And I'm
you learn more teaching for sure.
Yeah, well, and so I get to watch it broken down like at the kid level where it's like, it is 4 simple steps to success here. Like I actually get to. It's a different pace because I'm not getting beat up. I'm watching and I get to be the extra, and a bunch of good kids there too. So that's kind of helping to round me out. I think I haven't been at it that long, but I'm thinking it's going to pay massive dividends because I'm gonna, I'll have the simplified version of techniques, kind of maybe a little bit better in my head. So.
Yeah, I could see that definitely because you're slowing it down. You're breaking it down to those
for sure,
literally paint by numbers. Because when you're teaching someone to shoot, right? Yeah. Like you're teaching them to draw, right? It's here's the grip. How do we address the pistol?
Yeah. How
do we think about pistols? Like it's you're starting right from that base nothing.
Yeah.
And then working from there. And I find, man, there's tons of value there. Even from somebody who's done it for a while.
Yeah.
Man, those basics are just are so good because you're always going to come away with something.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And a lot of the kids there, they're competitors too. So they're they've got a lot of raw talent, so I'm actually stealing some of their moves as well.
Damn straight, man. It's the next generation.
Yeah.
You got to steal from them or they'll destroy us.
Exactly.
And they will destroy us eventually. We'll lose to that next generation.
It's got to happen.
We just got to make sure that that next generation is well led. And I think that's part of what our generation was lacking was in a lot of ways was good leadership. I mean, we were the ones we were the first ones who were kind of led by celebrities.
Generation X was a weird generation. All of our heroes are dead, right? Like
For the most part, yes.
Like, yeah,
and that's probably a good thing in a way.
Yeah.
Because now, if you look at the kids now, a lot of they're the second or third generation to be raised by popular culture.
Yeah.
And it's not doing well for them. I think for us, we saw that hard reality right away.
Yeah.
And, I think you had your Kurt Cobain fucking eating a shotgun was a wake up call for a lot of people our age.
Yeah, it was, but it wasn't for the rest of them, for all of the rest of our heroes, because, it maybe kind of started with Kurt. There was like this massive awareness drawn to these issues, and then it just kept going.
Oh yeah.
And they're still, they're still dropping.
Yeah. Well, I think anybody who's involved in on the drug side or the gang side, it's more lethal now than it was then.
For sure.
Because then back then you kind of you had a lot of leeway. You could do a lot of heroin before you finally kicked off.
Yeah.
But nowadays it's how many grains of fentanyl are fucking lethal, and they're finding that shit and everything. So
yeah, I don't know. I know drugs are a lot more dangerous now than they were when we were kids growing up. Yeah. It's just way riskier. And even trying to have the conversation with your kids, like, you just hope that they don't, when we were kids, you could make a bunch of bad decisions and get away with it. Because it was like,
nothing was recorded.
Yeah.
Everybody was, your parents were all old hippies for a lot. Like, they all went through the 60s.
Yeah. And so like hard drugs is like, oh, some kid's puking on mushrooms or did too much acid. He'll come down eventually. He ain't going to die.
Well, they had their cautionary tales too. Like their Janis Joplins and their Jimi Hendrix, their Jim Morrison, people who were at the height of their popularity and OD'd or passed out in a fucking bathtub or choked on their own puke or whatever. Like,
sure, yeah.
They had those cautionary tales as well. So they knew, but at the same time they were a little more chill with stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think today, what's out there now is risk a lot different.
The risk is so high, man.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Well, all the more, when I talk about that wholesome community and stuff like that, it holds a lot more value now, I think.
Yeah.
Like you look at the people who are more tied into family, tied into community, kind of dropping out of that popular culture to get, to pursue something that's more grounded rather than something that's tied to this popular culture, which I think at this point, we got to admit, like, that's fucking toxic.
Yeah,
there's not a lot of good fruit being born from that tree, right?
That's why I think it's important that people turn off their phones, except if they're watching this podcast, right?
Absolutely.
You want them to watch this, but like, go outside and hunt. Go get on the mats and fight. Like, do something that's real, like something you can touch with your hands, you can taste it, you can smell it.
Yeah, agreed.
Instead of living through a screen. Now again, I think, like, my kids grew up with there's phones and technology and computers and all that, but like, I grew up, like, we didn't have any of that. I didn't have a cell phone. Man, I think I was in my 20s before I owned a good one. But like, the microwave came out when I was a kid, right? Like we didn't have this stuff. Like the Tandy 1000 was a supercomputer.
Yep.
Like, we had the original Nintendo, and that thing was dynamite. And now you look at the stuff that kids have, it's way different. So, but the technology we had, as cool as it wasn't so cool that it dominated and captivated us 100% of the time. I tell my kids, like, I have zero memories of being inside as a kid. I just don't have any, because I don't think we were allowed inside.
That was part of it. Like, I remember we'd rent a VCR from Radio Shack because we didn't actually have a television.
So
we would borrow a neighbor's television. My parents would be like, okay, we're going out like Friday night. We're going to be across the street at the neighbors. They're having a party. All the kids are coming over here. Joe's going to bring over his television, and we're going to go down and you take the kids. down to Radio, it was Radio Shack.
Radio Shack back then,
and we're gonna rent a VCR
Yep.
and a half a dozen movies, and that's your guys' Friday. We'll get you some pizza and whatever else,
and all the kids are gonna watch those tapes over and over and over.
100%. And that was it. Like that was the edge of entertainment. That was like the new thing. That was the Netflix of its day, right?
Oh, for sure.
Fucking Radio Shack renting a VCR.
Yeah, and if you didn't bring that shit back, you got charged late fees too. So
and it was high, man. Not rewinding tapes like $50. You get charged like $50 for not rewinding a tape.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're in other times. I mean, that piece, "Fuck the Doomed," that piece that I read earlier.
Yeah.
"Fuck the Doomed" is a quote from the movie Where the Buffalo Roam with Bill Murray when he plays Hunter Thompson.
Okay.
And he's in the bathroom with Richard Nixon, I think, fucking taking a leak. That's what he says about "fuck the doomed," right?
Yeah.
Talking about all the people that the government's just abandoning, right? And I think we're kind of at an interesting spot right now. I think Maynard James Keenan used the line in a recent album he had for "A Perfect Circle." He used it again.
Okay.
And it was kind of funny because I was like, oh, wow, that stuck with somebody else as well, because I remember watching the movie in like the, I don't know, early 2000s. It was one of my favorite movies, watched it like a million times.
Yeah.
And then I think that Perfect Circle album came out like 3-4 years ago.
Okay.
4 years ago, 5 years ago. But I'd written that piece prior to that, but I remember hearing that song and being like, oh, that stuck with somebody else. But we're kind of in this place where, our government is not beneficial. It's not functioning in the way that it should, looking out for people. It's our social society is frayed. It's kind of scattered. It's distracted. It's not working the way it should. Our popular culture, like you look at everything, like album sales are down for the most part. Like movies aren't making as much money.
Yeah.
Like pop culture in general is kind of falling apart.
I wonder if part of that is market saturation. If we go back to like when we were kids, like how many times did you watch Top Gun, the original? Like I watched it 100 times because there was nothing else to watch, and I lived out in the middle of nowhere. But now, like my phone is a supercomputer that connects me to all the information, all the entertainment my brain can handle.
100%.
So it's kind of, I think people get saturated on, of course albums don't sell as good. When we were kids, like, man, if somebody got a new tape, you get everyone on the block together.
Yep.
And maybe get some beers and listen to that whole tape over and over and over. And then when CDs came out, like you'd literally have a CD listening party.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Or the old man's vinyl collection. Like we would get together and listen to music. That was what people did. And that's, it drew people together. But now, everybody can just download the song and listen to it individually on their phone. So it's not a reason to get together anymore.
Even in the underground music scene now, like the tapes are coming back. Cassette tapes are coming back.
Yeah, I saw
vinyl came back. I don't know. It's probably already came and went already.
I just bought the new Slipknot, the Cobalt vinyl edition. Of course, they didn't sell it in Canada, so I had to get my brother to buy it and mail it to me.
That's a damn good record. I was listening to it not that long ago.
Yeah.
Really impressed with that one.
I just listened to like side A.
Yeah, but I mean, like so much of like the way I take in entertainment, like so little of it is the mass-produced Hollywood stuff, right? Like music, it's not your popular top 40 stuff. You're kind of, there's so much out there that you can be listening to literally anything that you want. Like just something catches your ear, doesn't matter what it is. Sure, it could be top 40, or it's just as likely to be something some dude put out on Spotify that caught on that somebody liked. We're listening to Dallas Alexander. He's this Canadian dude, former JTF2 guy, who I think just got released from his contract this year and started recording music. And he's doing some country stuff, and it's really good. And I went to his YouTube channel, and I'm like checking out his videos. He's got some of his music on there. And I looked, and he's got like 168 followers because he's like, it's that new.
Wow.
Like it's that, like the
Yep.
channel has existed for like 2 months or something like that.
Yep.
So I'm like, I'll be 163.
Yeah.
Like, but that's the way it is now, is you get the stuff like right now because people can produce it. We can do stuff like this. A lot of the stuff I watch is independent stuff on YouTube, like
Sure.
stuff that's small creators just making entertainment.
And I think there's that's the good part of the world and the technology we have now, is that if you have one song, cool, you can put out that one song, you can produce it independently, put it on YouTube and get it out there. Whereas before, like, man, you had to have a band and a label and the whole thing if you wanted to, like, and you had to, like, you better have 12 tracks, bitch, or don't come knocking.
Oh yeah.
Like, you had to have a whole album to put out. So I think there's lots more opportunities for people to succeed at a smaller scale. But again, then you get this saturation. So instead of getting, 1 or 2 cool albums a month, maybe if you were lucky, and got 6 cool albums in a year that were worth buying on CD or tape, now it's like daily there's a new song that comes out.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, you could be listening to music for the rest of your life. You could listen to like new stuff you've never heard before.
Yeah.
Because it just keeps coming.
How's your beer?
This one's empty. Anyway, dude, we just cracked an hour.
We did. We made it.
I think this might be a good time to put a pin in it.
Yeah.
I should have enough here to work with to cut some video, cut some audio. I think we've got
Gray Range Podcast, episode 0.5.
So at 0.5, man. Yeah. I appreciate you coming out.
I appreciate you inviting me on for the first one. Let me crack this open so we can cheer this.
Yeah, this was it's a grand experiment.
Yeah.
I'm super excited to be doing this. It's something I've wanted to do for a while. Something I've had on my plate, for I think a couple of years.
Yeah.
And then to finally be putting it together is
you've been talking about it for at least 3 years.
I think that's about when I conceived of it, when I decided like I'm going to do this thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, the vector was just like how. So
well, good for you for plotting the course and then taking all the little steps along the way to get to this far. Like here we are doing it. Yeah, right on. Like cheers to you. Like right on,
man. Cheers. Thank you so much for being guest number 1.
Yeah, no, it's been an honor. Fantastic. You and I always have very interesting discussions. So, yeah.
Like I said, hopefully the first of many. I'm looking to have my group of regulars. As much as I'd like to bring on a lot of different people and have a lot of conversations with a variety of people, I do want to really focus on the community.
Yeah.
Have a core group of people who we can kind of share ideas, kind of get the word out about what's going on in Grand Prairie, kind of in our world.
Yeah.
And kind of how the bigger world filters into us, and then go from there, see what happens.
I don't think you'll have trouble getting guests, man. I got a short list of people I've already kind of bounced the idea off of, and they're like, "What, really? Oh, that's cool," because it's just it's local, and people are enthusiastic about something that's close to home. So,
well, like I said, if we don't tell our own story, someone else will tell it.
Yeah.
And I don't trust the fucking CBC.
Fact, yeah.
So let's this is just a vehicle, and if it gets out a little bit of information about the people around here, let them tell their story, and some of the fantastic human beings that I've had the virtue of being able to run into because of the things that we do, because of the common interest stuff that's happening. It's it's all comes full circle. So
yeah, right
on. So thanks a lot, and this is it. Gray Range Podcast signing out.
0.5. Love you, bro.